Shinnecock Hills, NY. Among those persons now WS Open winning Brooks Koepka singled out for praise soon after his Shinnecock Hills victory was the person clearly responsible in getting Koepka back to the pinnacle of major championship golf. Earlier this year, and indeed in his very first tournament of 2018, Koepka suffered a wrist injury in contesting the Tournament of Champions in Hawaii. When Koepka posted an opening score of 78, it was only those close to the Florida golfer who knew something was wrong. He continued with the tournament shooting scores of 74, 78 and 75 to eventually finish in 34th or last place on 13 over par. Now outsiders were saying something was clearly amiss with the reigning U.S. Open champion. Koepka had suffered a serious left wrist injury and would be sidelined from competition for nearly 4 months, missing 2 WGCA events and the Masters before returning to competition late in April. Koepka turned to Mark Wall, a certified physical therapist who has spent the past 8 years working exclusively for professional golfers on the PGA Tour. He has traveled the United States and abroad to over 250 tour events and worked with over 42 players. With his help, these tour players have achieved 20 victories, and with the 52-year-old Wall working currently with Jimmy Walker, J.B. Holmes, Sean O'Hair, Brandt Snedeker and Koepka. "He's a part of every decision that goes into my body," said Koepka in a recent article in the Suffolk Times and a regional newspaper out of Manatee on New York's Long Island and not far from this year's U.S. Open host venue. "He's on the phone and texting with my doctors. I actually speak with him more than anybody else." Koepka's victory was Wall's third major championship success after a maiden major triumph with Jimmy Walker and capturing the 2016 PGA Championship, and now back-to-back U.S. Open triumphs with Koepka. In working with Koepka and his injured wrist, Wall worked with a science involving snapping a bone back into place where Koepka has been dealing with a tendon issue that caused him to miss so many tournaments this year. Koepka finally returned to the tour in late April in New Orleans, but a fortnight later at the Players, Koepka aggravated his left wrist while on the TPC Sawgrass practice range. "I was in excruciating pain," Koepka said in the article. "I couldn't get the feeling in my hand to come back at all. I thought, oh man, here we go. I needed to get to Mark." Wall's work saw Koepka improve from a pair of 70s and a third round 74 to then shoot a final round 63 and eventually share 11th place. Another fortnight later, and Koepka produced 2 63s en route to second behind Jason Day at the Wells Fargo Championship, and now after another fortnight and Koepka is a WS Open winner and the first back-to-back winner of a U.S. Open in 29 years. And all thanks to Wall. Wall has long been a fan of golf. He took some courses on golf exercise as he worked to develop a new focus for himself, a process that took about a decade to develop. In the early 2000s, he took a specific course with Titleist where he learned about kinematic sequence. "The best way to describe it," he explains, "is when you see videos of athletes hooked up to machines that trace their movement for animation in video games. Except he's using such a machine to help golfers guard against and navigate through injuries. He doesn't want to change their swing, that's not his area of expertise, nor something he'd advise. Instead, he's measuring through graphs a golfer's movements and working to help them get the most out of their bodies. If someone has an inefficient golf swing, but they're making money doing it, they want to keep that. Mr. Wall said, "My job is basically changing the oil and changing the tires, not trying to pull the motor out and put a new transmission in. I'm just trying to keep it bright and shiny." His first opportunity to work with a tour regular came with Irish golfer Graham McDowell in 2008. The pair met up in Los Angeles, where Mr. Wall shared with the golfer what he had been working on. "I showed the correlation between this graph and their lack of strength or range of motion of an area, and I could quickly correct it because I was a manual therapist," he said of his early work with Mr. McDowell and others. "They could see a change right away. It struck a chord with a lot of people and I started coming out more to make my manual skills useful." A decade later, this is entirely how Mr. Wall makes a living, trading in the rates insurance companies reimburse healthcare providers for the type of compensation some of the world's most famous athletes are willing to pay to make sure their bodies run right. This includes non-traditional practices like cupping. Mr. Wall focuses most of his attention on the 7 pros he tours with, but also helps when other golfers have an issue. World Top 25 players Dustin Johnson, Justin Rose and Matt Kuchar have all come to him when dealing with physical issues. Jimmy Walker and Mark Wall and the Rodman Wanamaker Trophy. Mark could work for 15 to 20 guys if he wanted to, but he likes it to be more personal though, so he can be more thorough, said Koepka. Walker has worked with Wall since 2010 and in winning the 201 PGA Championship he singled out Wall for special praise. "He really helped keep my body feeling really good," said the Texas-born Walker. "He worked on my neck, which is where my problem area was, and he's kept all that feeling really, really solid. It's allowed me to go work and work hard." And their relationship was no more evident when Walker walked off the 18th hole at Baltusrol to be embraced by Wall.